Hey, Dad.
Hey, son, we need to have a chat.
A chat?
Yes.
About what?
A chat about college and how much it's going to cost and what you're on the hook for and what I'm on the hook for.
I'm on the hook for zero, right? I thought you were paying for everything.
Oh, you did? What gave you that idea?
Well, I remember when Mom asked me where money came from, I just pointed to your pocket where you keep your wallet, and there was money there.
And no one said anything, right?
No one said anything.
Hey, if this conversation sounds familiar, this is what we're talking about today. The whole idea that y'all got to have some conversations with your family around money before Junior goes heading off to college. So this is what we're going to chat through today. Some of those conversations, the questions that need to be asked, the information that should be shared. And here's the deal. This is the disclaimer. This is our opinion. And part of the reason it's our opinion is I personally have been on 750 college campuses over the last 15 years.
That's a lot.
I've had conversations with a lot of students and a lot of parents. And I found that there were some commonalities on the students who did not have their head on straight as it related to money, and those that absolutely knew what they owed, what they were there for, etc. So we're going to talk about all that stuff today.
Awesome.
Cool. Where should we begin?
Well, I want to create a context to you. I mean, you talked about the difference when you were on college campuses. You knew the difference between the students who had the conversation and who didn't.
Yep.
So I happened to be the one who did not have a conversation with my parents.
Yep.
And looking back, I totally wish that I had the conversation with my parents.
Yes.
There was a lack of transparency, and to be quite honest, the reason why there was because my mom wanted me, my younger sister and brother to focus on education.
Sure.
And not have to worry about the college debt, because we all went to private university, and at one point my brother was a freshman, my sister was a junior, I was a senior, so all three of us were in private college at one time.
I hope you guys are really nice to your parents.
No, very, I think.
Like seriously, like every Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays,
Yeah.
I hope you are going above and beyond for them.
It is definitely my commitment for sure. However, on the flip, so in one aspect that was nice, right? Like I didn't have to worry about finances. I was able to do my school experience.
Yep.
But once I found out how much I was actually on the hook for, my family was on the hook for, and more importantly, how much stress my dad was going through.
Yep.
Because my dad is the one who works in our family. My mom is a stay-at-home mom. I just saw how wow, knowing this prior to college or as soon as I got into college would have informed me to make different decisions.
Yeah.
I may not have changed my major 7 times. I graduated on time, but I may have, done certain internships or extracurriculars that may have been a little more financially responsible.
Sure.
So I want to start off by that, because the transparency and the importance of this conversation is can make the world of a difference.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the way that I would describe this is, if you're a parent and your child is getting ready to go to college, there really should be some level of shared ownership. And shared ownership, it requires 3 things. Number 1 is information. So in Nick's case, his dad was working hard to cover the bills, right? But that is information that was kept from the kids. And part of the reason it was because Nick's mom wanted to make sure the kids were focused on school. So that's admirable, right? That's a cool thing. The second part of shared ownership is decision making. And so decision making looks like, well, are you going to a public school, a private school, a community college? Are we going to get tons of credit hours in high school in order to offset some of those? These are all decisions that need to be made. And what I found is that when parents withhold that information from their kids, the kids automatically believe, well, the money's there, or I'm not worried about it. So they don't apply for scholarships. They don't get extra credit hours. They don't do the things that could actually change the third part of the equation, which is consequences. And the consequences of not sharing the information with your kids are things like you owe more in the Parent Plus loans, or your child has to borrow more and wrongly believes that it's on you, or this is money that doesn't have to be paid back. So the very first thing we need to focus on is shared ownership in this conversation. Information, decision-making, consequences.
That's perfect.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's some of the dialogue that really needs to be had. Number one is a discussion about how much has been saved for school already. Did you have this conversation at all?
Not at all.
Not at all.
The only thing that I knew was that my grandpa had set aside a education scholarship.
Okay.
Like if we maintained a particular GPA, we would get, I think it was like $100 a quarter.
Okay.
Or $20 per A letter grade. And then also, what I did know was the cost of a private institution with the scholarships was the same as a public school in state without the scholarships.
Okay.
So I ended up choosing a private school.
Yep.
But that is all I knew about where to go to school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no clarity around a bucket of money, how much was in the bucket, anything like that.
Zero.
I think there is a couple of schools of thought. One is you definitely tell your kids, here's how much we have. This is what we can afford. 1 year at a private school, 2 years at a public school, a full a community college experience, whatever it may be. The other school of thought says, I don't want them to know any of it. I want them to think maybe it's all on them or that it's completely covered. But I think what happens is the lack of communication around this leads students to either get into debt they didn't realize they had, or they're taking on student loans unbeknownst to their family members at some point.
Yeah.
Right? And then that creates an issue of its own. So make sure you have the conversation about how much has already been saved. Let's talk transparency, Nick. What would you wish your parents or that any parent could be more transparent about?
Yeah, I think the first thing, if I were a parent and I was talking to my future kids, I would ask them, why do you want to go to college? To get crystal clear on, okay, is college, is what they need maybe an apprenticeship or an internship, or do they need to go to a particular college in the East Coast or in the West Coast? Because that would allow me to really be of service to my kid and maybe present different options. For me, if my parents told me, hey, you would save X amount of dollars that you could, in tuition, that you could use to start a business or save or invest, but get the same education degree, I would have taken drastically different measures. I would have gone to community college for 2 years or a year and a half, got my credits, and then transferred to Santa Clara for whatever reason.
Sure.
And then been able to still graduate with a finance degree.
Yep.
So I think being able to work backwards is a huge first step and a recommendation that I would provide.
Cool. That transparency is a big deal. The college students that I met that had massive amounts of student loan debt, particularly when we were filming Broke, Busted, and Disgusted, they had no conversation with their parents whatsoever about how much college would cost, what they were on the hook for versus what their parents were paying. In fact, the state of student debt is a survey that was done by Thrivent Student Resources. And in the state of student debt, it talked about how many students wished their parents would have talked about money more, and it was a pretty significant amount of them. Similarly, the number of parents who were willing to sacrifice their own financial future in order for their kids to go to school, that number was very high. And I think with that transparent mentality, some students may have decided, no, that's crazy. I don't want you to sacrifice your retirement for me to go to this school. I'd rather go get a degree at this state school or community college and then move on if I can.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, maybe apply for more scholarships.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So where do we go from here?
Well, so there's a couple things. I think the main takeaways are that one, the conversation is definitely important, right? It actually dispels any uncommunicated expectations.
Yes.
It also creates the expectations that are created between the parent and child, or child to parent, and then it also really allows more informed decision making to occur.
Nice.
And I know, for you in conversations with your kids, like what's the difference that is made when you have these conversations?
Well, given the line of work that I'm in speaking on college campuses and all of that, my kids know what college costs. They know what tuition costs. They know what housing costs. They know how much books are. They know the boundaries. So by boundaries, I mean they know what amount has been saved or put away for them. And they also know that if they are to exceed that amount or exceed the tuition with scholarships, they are prepared to receive that money. Like, we're willing to give over what we've saved for college for them to do other things with, whether that be invest or buy a vehicle or a home or what have you.
Yeah.
So because we've been really clear with them about the future, I feel like they're more prepared and better prepared to make the decisions that they'll be forced to make at some point.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. You said expectations, and I want to comment on this really quick. There's this great quote that says, what does it say? It says, uncommunicated expectations are just pre-planned resentments. Uncommunicated expectations are just pre-planned resentments. So if you are not communicating the expectation of how much is expected for the kid to be on the hook or the parent to be on the hook for school, at some point it could be a resentment by the other party because they had this idea in mind that wasn't ever true to begin with.
Yeah.
So make sure you're communicating.
Yeah. So our challenge to you, and what we really invite you to take on, if you're a parent, to have this conversation with your children. If you're a child, or if you're children of parents, to have a conversation with your parents, really with the intent to make smarter decisions. Have this conversation around, cost of college, what are the expectations, etc. And there's a couple resources that I like to share. So again, Thrivent Student Resources has an awesome survey conducted called the State of Student Debt. There's also two TED Talks that this gentleman has given. One of them being the Changing Economic Realities of College, as well as the $10,000 Experiment When Money Isn't Real at the London School of Business. Those are two TED Talks that are amazing and address this conversation that we're talking about.
Totally.
And then there's also the documentary, Broke, Busted, and Disgusted, which talks about the student debt issue.
Crisis.
Yeah,
exactly.
So again, have this conversation. I promise a lot of things will open up, even if it might be a little uncomfortable. You'll be glad you had it versus had not it.
Indeed. Well said. Thanks for joining us on the show. If you like it, like, comment, subscribe down below. Make sure you send us an email at questions@masteryofmoney.com if there's anything we can answer for you on the show or by email. We'll do it. Thanks for joining us. Peace out.